Everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic Friday. Yes, it is Friday, August 21st. My name is Ed Gow Jr. I'm a member of the steering committee of Dad Central Ontario, which is part of Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I hope you're having a great day. And man, this summer is going real fast, isn't it? But so's 2020 going really fast. And we are continuing our monthly conversations for fathers. And this month, we are doing a conversation. The title of the conversation is Supporting Kids in the Transition Back to School. And yes, school is coming around the corner. So are we ready? Are you ready? Are your kids ready? Dads, are you ready? As always, my counterpart, the lead for Dad Central Ontario, is joining us for this conversation, Drew Solon. And Drew, how you doing today and how's your summer been?
Thank you, Ed. I'm doing pretty well. Feeling like it's hard to believe the summer's over, if I'm being honest. It's been a full summer. It's been an interesting summer. Been really great things, but also as we come to the end, there's also the element of returning to school, which is obviously why we're talking today. So I just want to personally welcome anyone who hasn't joined us for any of these live events before. We're really glad that you've joined us. My name is Drew Solon. I'm the director of Dad Central Ontario. And our goal with these conversations is always to provide support to help you be a positively involved dad or to help your work in supporting dads be positively involved. And so for today's conversation, I'm really grateful that we have three wonderful guests who have a lot of experience with parenting, with supporting children in their return to school, and with learning and development. And I also know that this topic is quite challenging given what everyone has experienced this year. I certainly have felt it. For context, my wife is a business owner who had to shut down her operations for several months. We also have three young kids who are school aged. One does have a compromised immune system, and I am working completely from home. So the stresses have certainly been present every day for us. So I think I can completely understand what anyone else might be going through. Obviously, as I said, our goal is that these conversations provide support. We also recognize that everyone's situation is different. So today we're focusing, I think, on important principles that dads or any parent can apply to be there for their kids, regardless of some of the varying circumstances that you might be facing. So the way it's going to work is we have some set questions for our panelists that will take us to around 12:50 p.m. At that point, we'll transition to Q&A. And so the Q&A format for us is via the chat feature. So as we go through the event, please type your questions and we'll do our best to moderate or bring them forward when the time is right, either in the midst of the conversation or probably during that Q&A session at the end. I'd also ask that you keep all comments or questions respectful. And we want to honor everyone who is in the conversation. I'll be monitoring it closely, and anything that doesn't align, we'll have to remove that. But because there are varying opinions and views, our goal is to focus on the principles that can be applied regardless, okay? So as I turn over, Ed, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I also want to acknowledge the support of Doveman Care to helping create these opportunities and create a space for these conversations and helping us provide additional resources for dads or those who work with dads. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation and learning from the panel today. So over to you, Ed.
Thank you so much. And I also would like to thank Doveman Care and Dad Central for making these important, relevant, and timely conversations happening on a regular basis. They're not only important for fathers, but they're also important for fathers and their families and the world around us. So before we go into the questions and answers, let's introduce, I like to say friends, even though I've just met them once, friends to the conversation today. First up, and I always like to do ladies first, we have Mary Tuntas. She's a public health nurse, child and health development, Toronto Public Health. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much, Ed. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and learn from each other and to share a little bit of the resources that I have. Thank you very much.
Absolutely our pleasure. Next up, Shawn Dunleavy. He's a K-8 classroom teacher, Limestone District School Board and coach, Queens Women's Rugby Team, and also a dad of two.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me here. And again, like Mary, looking forward to sharing sort of my perspective as a teacher, but also as a dad in what's been an historical period of time for us, and happy to looking forward to learning as well, getting some strategies of my own on my way out.
Welcome. Thank you for taking the time. And Taimo Garabagi, who has, he has the best background probably I've seen all this year on Zoom. So Taimo, how are you? Where are you? And thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Ed and Drew. I'm in a park in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. It's beautiful here. So that explains the background. And I just want to thank you, Ed and Drew, for organizing this event today, because back to school is a challenging time every year, but this year it's like no other, and I think it's really timely and it's really well placed. So I want to thank you for that. I'm happy if I can contribute anything. But that's all.
Well, you already contribute the background, so anything else would be a bonus, right? And I just want to include that Taimo is the director of intensive treatment services at the George Hull Center and is a dad of 3. So not only does he get outdoors. Two? Sorry,
yeah, only 2. That's
unless we don't. Well, we'll keep it at 2. All right.
It's just 2. It's just 2.
Okay. No problem. Well, folks, let's get at it in regards to the conversation piece. And again, as Drew said, if anyone has any questions and or comments, please put them in the chat, and we will try to get them in as much as possible. So our first conversation piece today is, from each one of your perspectives, what makes this year's return to school unique for parents and kids? Who wants to start off on that?
I'll be happy to start if you'd like me to. Yeah. So
go ahead.
Like I said earlier, it is really a school year like no other. For the first time, and I don't want to be too dramatic, but some of the decisions we make can be perceived as life and death. And when was that ever the case? During this pandemic. Everyone is trying to be as optimistic as possible, and so am I, and I am actually quite optimistic. But still, based on people's experiences with in their lives, with trauma, with things that they have gone through before, everyone knows that it's not business as usual at school. Many parents have very strong economic reasons to send their kids to school, which can cause parental guilt. If a mother or a father or both have to work and they make the decision to send their kid back to school, who can blame them? It's not a wrong decision. It's a reasonable decision to make, but still, it would weigh very heavily on those parents, And the same with the parents who decide to keep their kids at home, Also not a wrong decision, also a reasonable decision to make, but still, you constantly question yourself: am I doing the right thing? Right? So I would say the psychological load on both parents and kids is heavier than ever.
Yes, absolutely.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I agree totally, Taimo, with what you said. Absolutely. These unprecedented times, as we've heard so many times from Dr. Eileen Davila when we get our updates daily. And, the dilemma insofar as the number of minutes that a child should have in regards to school and what's actually happening and how to go about it. And so many parents are at home and working, and the childcare issue around that. And how can they even do this? I mean, my own daughter and son-in-law with a 3 and a 5-year-old, and they're particularly concerned, as we all are, but how do we juggle this? What is the whole situation for everyone? This is a very long-reaching arm, and we really don't even know what's going to be happening in September, October. People can change their mind. They can make a plan and then at the last minute back out of it, which is absolutely fine. So, I mean, in these uncertain times, it's we're making history. We're living, we're in such uncertain time that, any questions that any parent has or any organization, please put forward. And Toronto Public Health is working with the congregate setting team, and we're actually hiring 60 new staff just to go into the schools themselves. So this is huge. And, if there's any questions in regards to that, I'd be happy to talk about it at the end. Thank you, Ed.
Very welcome.
I think from my perspective, folks, some obvious statements, but we've not had our kids in regular school setting for 5 months now, and that regular life routine that we all have as sort of as students and folks that are in schools, you know, is sort of that school year, and then that break time in the summer to re-energize and get away for a bit and then get back at it. And so that clock, if you will, is completely, you know, been thrown to the mix as part of this. I think the big thing that really is going to make this different is even as much as, you know, lots of excitement perhaps for going back to school, the reality of what school is going to look like as different boards bring the students back is not like anything any of us have ever experienced in our lives as students. And so I think keeping that in mind, that this is an entirely new beginning for every adult in a school building, every student, every parent, you know, everybody connected to it. As I said, the safety measures, the pieces that are going to be in place for movement of children from place A to B without crossing and things like that, it's going to be very different. And I think the other piece that makes this September very different is the lack of socializing and the lack of relationships that have been able to happen over the summer. You know, everybody's been isolated to, you know, just their family, maybe a couple of friends. And so obviously we're at school for the learning aspect, but a big piece of that is the social emotional and, you know, developing those relationships and having adults to facilitate friendships and help them through that. And that's not been there in the same way for 5 months. And so I think as kids come back, it's going to look and feel very different. And it's going to take some practice to remember how to interact, I think, with other kids, you know, and problem solve. So that's I think a big one for me.
Excellent. Great start, everybody. Let's move into our next conversation piece. With all the information resources, plus the everyday challenges of life, it can be difficult to know what's most important. For example, school boards are sending out sometimes a 30-page plus document about school reopening procedures, and things are changing every day, because I just found out this morning in the Toronto area, they've pushed back school openings for a week.
Right.
Can you help dads sort through all this information and give your perspective on the most important principle dads can keep in mind going through the school year? So I'd like to have Timo, then Shawn, then Mary. So Timo, could you start off with that?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. I think the main thing for dads and for moms and for parents or caregivers, grandparents too, to keep in mind is that with all the anxiety that we feel ourselves inside of us regarding returning to school for our kids, we don't want to transmit or transfer that anxiety to our children, you know, and that is really, really important, because the kids have their own share of anxiety. And if they sense their parents being uncertain and nervous and frightened, quite frankly, right, it doesn't help at all. Now, so I'm not talking about pretending that everything is okay, but to really make that special effort to be strong for your kids, and to, instead of lamenting the issues, to discuss the issues and to address them in a age appropriate but pretty direct way, so that the kids feel, yes, this is an unusual time and my parents are dealing with it. You know, my parents are dealing with it and they're helping me through this, you know, especially with the younger kids. With some of the older kids, you really want to get their input too. And my daughter Eva is now 17. She's just starting grade 12 down in Milton, Ontario. And we really left the decision in many ways up to her if she wants to return, but we made sure that we gave her all of the information that we have, you know, and there's, as you said, there's a lot of information out there, you know, from the schools, from the boards, from the ministries, from public health, from television, from everywhere. Right? So you got to make sure that you don't transfer your own anxieties to your kids, and base your decisions on information.
Excellent. I think from sort of a dad / teacher perspective, you know, and this may differ, I think, from some of the information that's coming out, but for me personally, the emphasis isn't on the academics to start. You know, I think if we can all sort of appreciate that it's going to take time, and as Ed said, you know, we're now looking at staggered entries, and so once we have all of our students back into the schools, the emphasis is going to be on you know, getting them back to a place where they feel comfortable, where they're building relationships, where they're connecting with other people, and so I think if we can just sort of keep in mind as the adults, and as Tomo said, you know, having just discussions, lots of discussions, and that we need to start by building up their resilience, resiliency around friendships and around social interactions, and then around the academic pieces as that comes back. We're going to make some mistakes. We're going to have to figure out how to use, technology or doing things, in a way that was different from what they've done before. And so I think for me, that big principle is just, come back to resiliency. Let's sort of let them feel comfortable, let them feel confident. Lots of conversations with our kids as teachers, but also with our kids as dads and parents, about, just problem solving and not getting too caught up in, okay, we're right back into school. Let's shoot for the stars with those A's and get into the highest level schools. That will come, but that's not what's important to start, and so take some pressure off yourself as a dad, as a parent, to be having them back to where they were in January of last year. That's step 17. We're on step 1. Okay. So patience, I suppose, is the big word, I guess I'll finish with.
Good stuff. Mary.
Thank you very much, Ed. I agree with you, Shawn, totally. Patience. And of course, with Tomo's, not transfer your feelings of just inability to really address every single answer all the time for our children. But that's not what we're called to do. I think, to understand their feelings, and the feelings are so important. And just this new way, even of doing things, a lot of children are familiar now with very, what we're doing right now on a Zoom meeting, and they were familiar with having their Zoom classroom and just trying to connect that way. And what does that feel like? And what do we miss with the, reading of body language and the reading of facial expression when we are, doing things of this nature? So for our children, it's a whole new way of learning style. And if this is what they're going to be doing, we've got to make it as normal and as real and allow them to see us that we're doing the same thing. I'm in a closed bedroom door of my son where I've got a good connection, Ethernet wise. And we have to talk about things like, internet connections not being very good, or, maybe not wanting to participate and leaving the room, and that's okay. So just talking about their feelings, new ways of doing things, be prepared for just about anything, dads. Just relax. I think, the most important thing is to give yourself a pat on the back. You are doing the very best that you're doing in these times. And that's the most important thing, right? That's what we're called to do as parents. And as dads, it's sometimes it's such a big weight to carry with, how can I do things better for my children? When really you're doing the very best you can at these times.
Excellent. Tomo, I have a specific question for you as someone who works with kids returning to school and being a dad yourself. Can you give us a practical best practice for our kids, supporting our kids during this time?
Yeah. So, a lot of times I've been thinking about that question, and a lot of times parents and dads especially want to be close to their kids, right? So the best thing to do really is to not only ask superficial questions, how was your day? How was school? What's new kind of thing, but you really have to engage your children. Your children have to know that you're interested not only in the big picture of their lives, but in the nitty gritty, in the details, right? And so you want to ask those follow-up questions. You want to know when they say, yeah, and then Tyler said this and Brittany did that, who Tyler and Brittany are. You want to know the names of every one of your kids' teachers. You want to be able what I love when I hear dads, especially with their own kids, sons or daughters, when I hear the kids say, me and my dad say, or me and my dad think, or me and my dad called my teacher. I love that when they start sentences like that, because it shows you there's that closeness. The kids feel that they're not alone in this. And I would strongly recommend for every dad and every mom and every parent to try to create that kind of relationship with your kid. Get into the details of their lives, not only the big picture.
Thank you so much. Great answer. Yeah. Next up, we've got a question or a conversation piece for Shawn. From an educator's perspective, whether that's in class, remote, or a combination of the two, what's a best practice that dads can apply to support their children starting in September?
So I think just before I jump into that, something Tomo said sort of piqued my interest too. Those questions we've all lived that. Hey, buddy, you know, what'd you do at school today? Nothing. You know, what'd you learn today? Nothing. And so I think it's just changing up those questions. I know I can't remember where I picked it up, but even, you know, hey, you know, tell me the silliest thing you saw today, or, you know, what's the funniest thing you did today, or, you know, what was, you know, just giving them a little bit more than this open sort of vast, what did you do today? You know, the sort of long. So if you've struggled with getting some of those, you know, conversations going, or asking some of those questions, just, yeah, change it up just a little bit, and you know, make it a bit fun, and you might get some more results. In terms of the question, I think for me, it's really, you know, celebrate, once we get to that point, celebrate the process of learning. Don't get caught up in, you know, and again, I appreciate, you know, Tom, I think you said, you know, your students that are into grade 12, and we're looking at post-secondary, and there's some different considerations there, but in general, as we move back into the schools, and you know, that sort of settles down, and we're into a routine with that, celebrate the process of learning. And so, you know, whether that's through questioning when your kiddos come home at the end of the day, or you know, when you're sort of connecting with them, that takes pressure off them to maybe feel, you know, that they need to get back to sort of where they were, or it just sort of removes a whole piece of pressure that they may be failing and not sharing around going back to school. Like, how do I get back to sort of where I was, you know, oh, I've missed so much school, and, you know, how do I get back there? And I'm sure dads and parents are feeling that too. You know, how am my kids are so far behind now. The spring was such a challenge, you know. And I think if we can just celebrate that process of learning, you know, and base our questioning and our discussions with our kids around, you know, the what and sort of the why, and not what they achieved that day. And I know, at least in the conversations I've had with my colleagues, that's very much the approach. It's we've got to redevelop that confidence in being in a school atmosphere, and just the love of learning again. I think part of that, and Mary, you made a really good comment, if I can piggyback on that, is you think of how much of the last 5 months that we've all had to change what and how we do what we do. And how many opportunities have been in that. You know, this has been a crazy 5 months, but even something like this platform and some of the other learning platforms, I think if we can share with our children, you know, hey, look, buddy, you know, I'm actually using Zoom to, you know, to connect with my colleagues too, and we're doing work this way, or hey, I saw you using Google Classroom, and now we're using that with my team, and so I think if we can celebrate again, you know, some of this perhaps digital learning that's happening in different contexts, and celebrating that process of learning, it takes that pressure off the kids, but it takes that pressure off us as parents of worrying about the outcome piece. Let's just celebrate the learning, I think. Okay, thank you. Oh.
Shawn.
Sorry, Ed, I can't hear you there, and I just—
No, it's all right. Can you hear me now?
I can now.
we can hear you now.
All right. So you mentioned a word 3 times, so I want you to dig deeper on it.
Okay.
I love what you said, and I'm an educator's son. My father was a school teacher for 38 years in the same public school, so I had to listen to him not only as a son, but sometimes as like a student. Can you expand on the celebrate the process of learning? I love that term. So
Perfect.
Could you just expand on that? I think that's beautiful.
Sure. I think it's, you know, I think, you know, as a teacher, you know, I'm not getting caught up in assigning grades and assigning sort of evaluations for sort of everything that's happening. You know, it's feedback based. It's questioning. It's sort of piquing that curiosity and that sort of innovation, you know, through that. So if our kids are working on something, if they're doing distance learning and they're at home, it's asking them some questions about what they're learning and where, you know, how does that connect to something else that you're interested in. Maybe it's an idea for something you could do as a dad. You know, maybe they're working on something to do with animals, and if it's not possible to go to an actual place, there's all kinds of things online that you can do to extend that learning. And so I think when I say sort of celebrate the learning, you know, celebrate the process, it's that evaluative grade at the end, that's the end, so that's sort of the end piece. And it's using questioning, it's doing, activities sort of at home, again, as I said, to sort of pique that curiosity, and celebrating those sort of little successes along the way, so if I have a 7-year-old and if he's, he's working on some reading comprehension and we're doing that at home, it's celebrating him, figuring out, maybe a new word or using it or recognizing it in another book, and not getting caught up in, like, oh, did you have a test today? Or, yeah, I don't know if I'm sort of answering your question all the way, Ed, but yeah, don't get caught up on sort of the end result, the A's and the B's and the C's and those sort of things. We want, and hopefully, I mean, it's a slow process, but I'd like to think education is really changing from what it was when I think a lot of us went through, and into a place where it's not so grade driven. It's sort of, I don't see myself as somebody standing at the room giving information. I'm the keeper of the knowledge. Not at all. I'm a guide. I'm a facilitator. I want to help these kids, follow along a pathway of learning, and so I think if you can mimic that as a dad, don't, yes, sort of grades have a place in certain contexts. They don't, get me wrong with that, but I think if we can see ourselves as, listen to what they say in those questions, in those answers, and they'll give you tidbits about where they want to go with it, yeah.
Ed, if I may say, just in adding with the celebration. Oh, can I hear?
Yep.
I can hear you.
Can hear you, Mary.
Oh, okay, super. Celebrating health, first of all, and what does that mean? And, we're focusing on what physical and mental health is, but I think that's a wonderful opportunity for instructing, teaching our children, and just talking about health, but celebrating our connectedness as a family. To me, this is a unique time that we're all cocooning, and we have this ability just to really get to know our children. If you have that opportunity, it's a wonderful time, because we're not inundated with a lot of things that perhaps we are, and we all know, with travel and commute and all kinds of other things that aren't occupying our time so much, that we are celebrating meals. We are celebrating being together. We are celebrating in such a wonderful way that, to put a positive spin on this, together time and unique time would be a beautiful thing to do. And I know many families who are. We're just looking at it like, wow, what a great opportunity we have to be together, right? Like no other time in history.
Absolutely. And I just want to piggyback what both you are saying, that especially when I'm mentoring men, so many of them, and they look at, I'm not going to be happy till I reach the end goal, but there's all these little successes along the way that get avoided. And it's a great growth opportunity. So I definitely believe in what both of you have been saying. So Mary, now from you, we'd like to know, what are some of the major steps a parent can do to prepare kids to stay healthy and safe this fall?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Usually we do talk about the vaccine for the flu, for the fall, and we talk about it in our parenting groups, and ask everyone to consider that. Now that's taken a whole new spin, because some of the signs and symptoms of COVID-19 unfortunately mimic the common flu, and so to be aware of just symptomatology in general. Okay, so we're looking at fever, we're looking at fatigue, we're looking at muscle aches, we're looking at loss of smell and loss of taste, and some of the other factors that go with it. Having said that, with our children, sometimes, we don't want to do any fear mongering. We don't want to cause them undue stress. We've all been a little bit reclusive. We might need some time to get back out into the outside world. And everybody does that a little bit differently. And every child will do it a little bit differently. And every team will do it differently. So we have to be gentle with that approach as well. But to things to mitigate, spread of anything from hand washing to a distance keeping to, let's talk about sports and the reentry into sports and physical activity. We need to talk about a lot of things with our kids, with our schools, with our coaches. And I know we've got a coach on, so these are very important and critical. Even the idea about wearing masks. I don't know how parents and dads, what you're doing with, even discussing mask wearing with your children when you're going out, whether it's, if you ventured out to a store or had an outdoor meal on a patio with your family, or what you're doing. But that whole mask wearing thing, we have to get a little bit comfortable with it, because it may be something that we're doing for the next year to maybe year and a half. So we need to get familiar with that. So these are practices that we can do at home. We can just talk to our children about it. What do they know? What is COVID-19? What do you think it is? What is coronavirus? And talk to our kids. They know this. They want to know as much as we can share with them without frightening them. Right? So I think these are all just a few of the little practices that we can do.
Thank you. Drew, I know you wanted to have a follow-up from what Tomo said, so if you can jump in now.
Yeah, at the same time, I just noticed that Helen put a great question as well into the chat. So my follow-up, Tom, was you had talked about, fostering this idea of, me and my dad, and you love hearing it when kids are expressing that, it's like they've got this support from dad at home, that togetherness. And my question was, how does a dad go about creating that or fostering that in the relationship with the kids? And I know it's a bigger question but I just want to throw it out there.
I mean, I think we all probably know that mental health is really about relationships and communication in many ways, right? And the more we can foster communicating in a real way with our children, and like I said earlier at the beginning of the conversation, not in a superficial way, but in a really in-depth way, to get into the issues that we know are on our kids' minds. And not just the issues that we think should be on their minds, right? Sometimes we talk about, playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. PACE, there's a mnemonic device, PACE, right? Where we are always playful with our kids. We're accepting of their feelings and of their opinions that we don't share sometimes. We are curious about their experience and about what's happening to them, and how they're feeling and and their relationships with other people, right? And we are full of empathy. We're full of empathy. We always try to put ourselves into their shoes. How would I feel about this if I was a 12-year-old boy or a 12-year-old girl, or even younger or older? So by really making that extra effort to see the world through the eyes of our kids, and then before you know it, you will find that the kids feel my dad is there and my mom is there for me, right? I'm not alone in this, and we're doing this together. And then you'll hear statements like, me and my dad think, or me and my mom think, and that's what you want. That's what you want at this point, right? So it's about detail, not, and I thought Shawn made some good points there earlier too, in asking open-ended questions, not just hoping for them to say, oh yeah, my day was okay. Okay, good, I can check mark that now, right? That's not enough. You want more. You want more. Yeah.
Great.
And if I may just add just one very brief thing, I really like what Mary said earlier too. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Where you can practice, the mask wearing and the physical distancing. You can practice that before school starts. It's high time actually to start doing that. So because kids don't like surprises, I've noticed that about kids. They want to kind of be prepared of what they're getting into. So I would practice a little bit with them. Actually, I would practice a lot with them, with younger kids especially. So it's a good point that Mary made there. Yeah.
Excellent. Mary, anything you want to add? Because I heard you saying you're in agreement. Anything you wanted to add?
This is fabulous. But I the whole approach of just spending time, I think to carve a little bit of time, a dad needs to just, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a day to really be grassroots with your child. And each child individually is so important. I mean, a child just feels that they're being respected, they're being listened to, they're being heard, they're worthy of their father's undivided time, they're one-on-one, like that's beautiful. And just have a discussion, because every child will come at it different. I see in the chat, are they anxious or dreading? You might have two children in the household. One is thrilled, one's an extrovert, one is, oh my goodness, I want to stay home. And as a parent, as a dad, we have to deal with that in a very non-judgmental way and address their feelings. So I think the one-on-one time is critical with our kids right now. And if you have someone to spell you off with your other children, if you have more than one, that's a blessing. But they need that. They really need that. And, just like we thrive if someone listens to us one-on-one, let's apply it to our children. But right now would be the time to be doing that. So lots of practicing. I've read somewhere in a chat that a parent will only let their child use a device for whatever it was for game playing if they were wearing a mask while doing it. And that was to prepare them. Now, I think it's a little bit coercive, nevertheless, you know, it is a way to help a child just wear it. And if they're engaged in something that they really like to do, then they'll forget that they're wearing the mask. So it's a win-win situation.
Excellent. All right. Next conversation piece we have here. Some parents will choose remote learning. Others will be sending kids back to class. And we also know that there's no rule book for this situation because we're in unprecedented times. Educators, public health officials, and parents are all dealing with completely new experiences. So with all that in mind, and that is a lot of all, what should dads be looking for in kids once the school year starts? From your professional experience, what are the quote warning signs unquote that dads can look for around? Timo can speak to mental health, learning and development. Shawn can speak on, and then Mary speak about physical health. So Timo, let's start with you.
Okay, so that is a very good question, actually. And there are, in fact, quite a number of warning signs. When the number one protective factor here is that you know your children, you know, and whenever you find there is a variance or there's a difference in the way the kid is acting or speaking or not speaking, then you know that needs to be explored, right? So typical warning signs could be that your child becomes very quiet, you know, or that your child's behavior changes and they become more aggressive or louder than they usually are, or quieter than they usually are, or sleeping problems. You know, a lot of times you find that kids will tell you, I couldn't sleep last night, I had bad dreams last night. All kinds of sleeping issues can develop, you know, even though they're not telling you exactly what it is, right? Because of the new social environment at the schools, it's going to be very difficult for many kids to adjust to that new environment. You know, for example, your best friend that you never had any problems with, maybe his or her family is very laissez-faire about all of the safety stuff. It's overstated, no big deal. But your family isn't like that. How do you reconcile those two things with your peers at school without appearing that you don't like them anymore suddenly? So all of those things will put added pressure on your kids, and that will show in some ways. But as I said before, and I never tire of saying that, you really have to dig a bit. Kids will not tell you, this is what's on my mind here, Dad, you know, but they will show it in their behavior and in the differences in their behavior. So really dig for that and talk with them like you never have before this coming school year. That's what I would strongly recommend that, you know, really be there with them. And in addition to that, though, you can also use informants, you know, get a hold of the teacher if you can. You know, the teachers are very helpful with that. They always have been, and I'm sure they'll continue to be, right? Ask them if they notice any differences, if they feel that the kid is doing okay in school, you know, get their input also. Other family members, people that know your kid, that have been around your kid, ask them too, you know, include them, make it a little community around your kid. So because you do not want to miss the signs. It can even move into significant anxiety and depression with some kids, you know, especially kids that had already had some of these issues before, even long before the pandemic. We all know that 1 in 5 children in Ontario suffers from mental health issues. Many of them are not getting help. I very much doubt that has gotten better through this pandemic and the school closures. Right? So now is the time to really pay attention to that.
Thank you. Learning and development, Shawn.
So I think Timo, I mean, clearly in his experience, I mean, he's cited all the you know, the key behavior pieces that you're going to change, and I think that's it. It's noticing behavior change. I know sort of in a school setting, kids don't come to school to misbehave. You know, they don't wake up in the morning and say, I think I'm gonna, you know, have this happen today and go off the rails. You know, and so I think it's on our side of things, and parents too. It's noticing those changes, and it comes back to those relationships. That's sort of been an underlying theme I think we've all discussed, is, you know, really knowing your child, speaking to them, you know, finding moments to interact with just them and digging deeper. And so I think if I can take that a bit further from Timo, is, you know, it really helps us help your child, help the children, you know, and move them along when we can have sort of open conversations with parents. And so if maybe I'm not noticing something with your child at school, but at home sleep is becoming a real concern, or outburst behavior, things like that. And I appreciate totally as a parent, you know, sharing some of those things. You feel like you're not, you know, I'm not a very good parent. My child's behaving like this, or we're having these outbursts, but I can, you know, honestly tell you when I'm able to have a conversation with a parent and they share those things, and then it explains some behavior, and it really lets us work together to help your child. And so from a learning and development piece, you know, if I'm seeing some of those behaviors that Thomas sort of mentioned, that child's trying to communicate something. They're not able to sort of say, I'm really freaked out by having to wear a mask all day. Their behavior is sort of trying to tell me that. And so I guess if I can just reinforce, you know, really encouraging all the dads and parents sort of that are listening, you know, and I get sometimes it's easier said than done, you know, those parent-teacher relationships. I get that. But if we can really, you know, take that deeper, especially now as we get to school, and keep us in the loop and vice versa, you know, so that we can support that. With the learning and development piece, I guess more specifically, you know, I think if you're connected to what your child's doing, I know a lot of teachers are using sort of Google Classroom, pardon me, as a platform. If you're doing distance learning, I think you'll see a continuation of some of that as a home communication piece. Try to know as much as you can about what's sort of happening at school. And so then when you're having those conversations, you can, you know, you can sort of keep us in the loop of things that you know, maybe your child's coming home and that's when they unload that they're feeling frustrated about something or they're challenged by a certain aspect. And so I guess, again, it's that partnership with the folks at school that's sort of going to make this key to catching anything early on from a learning and development piece.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mary.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, so from a physical literacy or physical activity perspective, you know, we can always refer to the Canadian guidelines of physical activity, or Sport for Life Canada, which has different age groups, has different amount of times necessary for how much exercise a child needs. But, you know, we're banking on about 180 minutes. That's a lot of time. So we need to make sure our kids are able to get that somehow. Now, everybody's living situation is different, be it in, you know, an apartment or a home, or are you going to be walking to school if you do go to school? But incorporating that into your daily routine. Now, all of us know who have been home for the last 5 months, I hope it's not just me, but we've added a few pounds, right? We're sedentary. We're in front of screen time, and we all know about childhood obesity and screen time. So, I mean, I'm talking about adult obesity now and screen time because of the last 5 months. So we have to kind of practice what we preach, and we have the time now to, you know, preparing whole foods and better healthy foods at home because we're all at home. So what we eat, our nutrition, our physical activity, and making it part of the day. And what a wonderful thing to do with as a dad and a child of any age is a nice walk. I mean, walking. So we can incorporate that. You know, I don't know how the schools are going to, what exactly they'll be doing with physical activity at school. It will be very interesting, and every school will probably handle it differently. But just incorporating into our own life as role models, I think, you know, that's one thing as dads we can do, and I hope you're all doing, just to keep fit. And there's nothing better than physical activity, as we all know, you know, for our endorphins, for our serotonin levels, for a whole myriad of things. So keep that up. And, you know, there are websites that you can access, you know, for ideas. There are, again, back to screen, I've participated in online exercise, be it yoga or eccentrics or various things. But at this point in time, if I don't need to look at a screen, I would rather be going outdoors to have my physical activity. So just as Shawn and Tom have said, you know, the discussion, the communication, and hammer it out with your kids. What shall we do? What can we do together? Is there a child in your bubble that we can physical distance with and walk together? You know, so incorporating friendships or friends, it's a big part of, you know, what our children need right now, because they are missing their little buddies and their friends, probably a lot more so than we realize.
Excellent. Well, we're winding down really quick here, so we're going to get right into our Q&As right now. So, and anyone from the panel can answer and chime in on this. So first Q&A we have is Cassidy. She says they say they are a counselor in Northern British Columbia, wondering if you have any practical ideas for promoting peer/social connection for those kiddos who are not going back to in-person school.
I can make a comment on that one, right? And I mean, it's not unlike it has been for the last 5 months or so when kids were in school, right? it's really important to foster continued connection with peers, you know. And it is possible for kids to go outside together, you know, to keep the physical distancing rules. To if they go, even if they want to go get some ice cream or something, they can wear masks depending on the jurisdiction that you live in, right? But first of all, it's a good practice for the health, rules that they need to follow at school. But also they need to continue the social and the real life social interactions. In addition to that, of course, there are the virtual interactions that I also encourage. They're actually very helpful too. There's no question about it. As simple as telephone, but you know, online meetings, FaceTime, all of those things are, you know, other social media. But we don't want the kids to get used to being alone too much, you know. That is not going to be helpful to them. Or to just be with their parents and family members all the time, right? Which is a beautiful thing, and we talked about that. But they need peers who are not related to them in their lives.
Okay.
I think from my perspective, you know, too, it's maybe ask sort of those parents too, because they may not realize, as Tomo said, you can do a little bit more. You know, you can actually go to a park and still have some social distancing and have that sort of face-to-face interaction. If virtual is sort of the only option there, I know a nephew of mine actually set up an iPad, I think, you know, with another friend, and they were doing like trick shots on a trampoline on a basketball thing, right? And so it's not the same. We all, you know, again, the in-person is paramount, but if as a second option, you know, it doesn't just have to be this sitting in a chair talking. You know, I've seen kids playing some board games virtually, and as I said, trick shots and, you know, hockey and basketball. And so I think try to think of some of those things that maybe you would do with a friend and think, okay, can I set this up virtually if there's no way you can do the actual in-person?
Mary?
Yes, I think that's a really great question. And it's really the comfort level too of the parents or the dads with another dad and another family and all of that business. Where have they been, who they've interacted with? And are we going to really indeed keep our physical distancing intact? So there's a lot of communication that parents and dads have to do with other dads, like, where have you been? Can we do this? If you want to have a, you know, let's say a dinner party together where there is physical distancing, which is so important and critical. You know, we have to commune, we have to break bread together, we have to eat with our friends together, we have to do these things, you know, and children need, they need that companionship. Now, having said that about companionship, there's been a huge increase in the number of people who have got a pet of some kind during this pandemic, be it dog, cat, or whatever. And, you know, that can be a wonderful source for a child to love, to take care of, to have, you know, I mean, will it continue? I think it's very important because that's the unconditional love that they're getting, not only from, you know, that animal or that pet, but same with a very good friend. And they can talk about things that they may not with their dad, right? So, you know, lots of ideas.
Good. Got a question here from Helen. I don't know if it has been covered, but I want to make sure we put it out there. She says, do you have any tips to motivate children who may be experiencing anxiety in going back to school and keeping them homeschooled is not viable for the parents?
Yeah, so go ahead. You go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Actually, I think it might be better. Okay, I'll say it very briefly, but I think the answer might be better. Anxiety, I mean, everyone's anxiety is heightened right now. Parents, children, everybody. Kids who already have issues with anxiety, you know, require that constant reassurance, you know, and everything that we talked about, they require twice as much, you know. So they're really getting into the issues with them. They're also getting them used to maybe walking to the school, you know, and getting, you know, just because they haven't seen it in 5 months, maybe in some cases, you know, calling some of their friends who are also going to go back, see how they feel, you know, what are they thinking about, you know, like just to kind of refamiliarize themselves with being students. And if I may, before Shawn goes, if I may just very briefly say, sometimes in spite of our best efforts, the mental health issues that our kids bring to us are more than we can handle as parents, right? And children's mental health agencies are actually open. You know, they're open to meet with kids and to help families, even if much of it at this time still happens virtually. But I know many therapists that meet with kids online and they have very helpful meetings with them. So don't think that it is not possible to get professional help right now, because it actually is. All you have to do is Google, you know, children's mental health in your area, wherever it is in Canada, and you will hopefully find the kind of support that you need for your kids. I just wanted to mention that.
Very cool. I think, Helen, from my perspective, if it doesn't happen anyway, I would reach out and connect with your school, with your child's sort of teacher, and see if a connection can happen. I know in my own site, staff, teachers are calling the students. They're sending out sort of pictures of what it's going to look like. They're doing videos of how it'll look like moving through the school. So similar to what you were saying, Tom, starting to sort of, give some of those visuals and those senses of what it's going to look like and how it's going to look and feel a little bit different. And as I said, I know that the teachers are looking to sort of connect to sort of over the phone and just have some questions or some information about that. So I think doing as much as we can, to give them a sense of, okay, I know who my teacher is. I see a picture of my classroom. I see where my seat is. And if that sort of isn't sort of forthcoming, maybe reach out. There's a lot of moving parts right now. And I think with the staggered starts, even listening to this conversation, a few things have popped into my head about what we can add to what we're doing. So if it doesn't happen anyways, reach out to your school and ask if that support could be given to help your child.
Anything you want to add, Mary?
Well, I'll just add, in Toronto here, we do a program with the early childhood education centers, the early years, which you probably are familiar with. And it's something called Welcome to Kindergarten. And it was just a really beautiful little introductory program in what children could expect when they go back to school. Those principles apply even much the same as to any age group, junior and grade 8 going down. Whether it, if your child needs to visit the school on their own and maybe meet the teacher, that type of thing can be arranged if that would help decrease the child's anxiety level. But even as simple as taking your your lunch bag to a park and eating that out. So you're not at home, you're outside, the child is eating it themselves on their own, no help from the parent, and maybe meeting another friend in the park setting, as you were mentioning, Shawn, but eating together, and doing that. And just, they haven't been, opening their own little lunch box for 5 months. And so, we want to ensure that they're even going to be doing that if they do go. So just little things, but for tips for this Welcome to Kindergarten, just think of our kindergarten children who don't know any better and who are starting school this year, so they don't know life any differently than what's happening right now. And they'll probably go with the flow beautifully because they don't have any, anticipations of how things work. So that'll be interesting to watch how they do in the long run, in the upcoming month, right?
All right, we got one or two more quick questions. One of them is, and let me just pull it up here. Are any of you noticing the use of technology and screens and the effect it's having on our young people throughout home learning?
Go ahead, Shawn. I think you have some thoughts on that.
I just, as a dad too, I think that's been a constant challenge as a parent. I think lots of times over the last 5 months, feeling like it's technology's sort of been a crutch, and it's sort of that really easy thing that you can do as a parent to engage, and so I guess from a dad to many other dads or to other parents that are out there, I get it. Just because I'm in a teaching role doesn't mean necessarily doing it any better than everyone else. So I think cut yourself some slack with that. I think this hasn't been a normal 5 months, and so if you've relied on tech a little bit more then you're comfortable. I think we all have, and that's part of this process of moving out of this, into something different is getting away from that. And so Ed, jump in if I'm off track a little bit here. So more, what do we do? How can we help them to sort of break those sort of connections to the tech a little bit? I think what I've tried, and for this, just for what it's worth with my own guys, is getting them to value it being one of lots of things. And I don't know, it's not as scripted as you have to do this, and this before you can do tech. But I think getting them to, we're going to go outside and we're going to play basketball in the driveway for, a little bit, or we're going to go to the park first. And then, maybe we're back, we can have a little bit of quiet time. And so I think valuing it, because we have to remind ourselves too, how often are we modeling sitting with them doing something else and we're on a device, on a phone, on a computer, an iPad. And so, I think in terms of breaking that connection a little bit, value it as one of many things that they can do to sort of be healthy. And I think, and maybe connecting that tech to something else, right? Maybe you're using, I know there's a couple of great apps, if you go out for a walk in the woods where you can take a picture of different species and it'll tell you what it is, what the plant is, what the animal is, and so connecting some of that tech back to some learning. I guess back to my comment about that process of learning, maybe let's transition the tech from entertainment, which I think it's been largely, to back into a bit of a learning tool. Just thinking off the top of my head.
Infotainment.
Infotainment. You got
There
it.
you go. Infotainment. Mary, anything you want to add?
Well, I think we've kind of wrapped that in a nutshell. We did have guidelines through public health on the amount of time and screen time, and that's kind of gone out the window. But it does take away our ability to have a nice communication or dialogue. Dialogue, theologos, is two people speaking together, and we have to incorporate that into our day, so it's not just screen with person, it's two people. So theologos. So I think keeping that in mind, screen time is an unnecessary evil, unfortunately. So we make of it as we will. You make your own rules in your own household, dads. No screen time during meals. That's a really great one to maybe think about doing, because it offers the opportunity for discussion, dialogue. So that's, yeah.
Okay. One more conversation piece, and it'll be short and sweet. If there was one thing a dad could do to help his children during the return to school, what would you say that one thing could be?
I would go with, be with your child more than you ever have. Talk to your child more than you ever have, and support your child more than you ever have. If you're questioning yourself whether it's enough, it's not enough. Do more.
Wonderful. Shawn?
I think for me, it's just that sort of statement. We are all in this together, as a teacher coming into the year and having the privilege of sort of having these specialists with me to really reinforce that, you as a dad going into the school year, it's not you alone, it's you with your teacher, it's you with the mental health supports, it's you with public health, it's you with family, and play. Just get out and play. I think that underlying piece of connecting and the theologos, like you said, I think we've all had those moments over the last 5 months where playing and is where we've all of a sudden had this aha moment with our kids. And so I remind myself often, park whatever you're doing, go out and play, because there's going to be a time when that's not going to be an option for you anymore. So enjoy some play with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Mary?
I would say physical touch. To me, the importance of a big hug, a big dad bear hug. Hugging and the importance of touch. We are not getting touched by anybody else except for those in our immediate circle. So, pat on the back. I love you. Say I love you. Say it a number of times. Say it every day, all the time. You can never hear it too much, and mean it, and hopefully that will be reciprocated by your children. And, of course, we model what we want them to say and do and hear. So a nice, gentle touch, a hug, a hug, a hug. So that to me is the most important thing. I'm missing hugging my grandchildren more than anything. I have not hugged them in 5 months.
Oh, wow.
Kiss the top of their heads. That's it. And, again, immune compromise. We heard from Drew that he is a child as well, and one of my grandchildren. And, that's out there. So it's better to err on the side of caution. We're incorporating our safety mitigating factors by physical distancing. But those of you that have someone to hug, and you dads have a child to hug, you're very lucky, because there's a lot of people out there who are living alone. They're by themselves. They haven't had a touch in 5 months or more. So that's
excellent. Well, friends, thank you so much. Outstanding. And I'm going to give it back to Drew.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mary, Shawn, Tomo. It has been a really enriching conversation. I've taken lots of notes for myself, just to be able to try and take and apply and integrate. And so I just want to reiterate some of the things that I heard, just as to wrap it up. The idea of partnership, I think, was common. Partnership with everyone who's involved with your child, whether it be your parent, the other parent, whether it be the teachers, critical, but also partnership with your child. Tama, you really spoke to the idea of getting into their world, really being there more than maybe you ever have, and just partnering with them in a time like this is really critical. I heard that, being able to manage ourselves and not translating that is really important as well. So I think critical piece for dads and for parents. So those are the things that I'm taking away along with everything else. I really appreciate your comment about, these aren't things that parents need to do all alone as well, right? The fact that mental health support is there and available, and to tap into those resources. I know as a dad in particular, many times I felt I got to figure this out. I got to sort this out. I have to do it. And very reluctant to maybe take that next step and say, I actually need some help. I'm not really sure what to do here. And I could really use some support. And I think that's a critical piece. So thank you for mentioning that point. Very important, and great to know that we have got access to those supports. They're all ready and waiting essentially to provide that. So with that, I just want to again thank everyone for being on the call. Yep.
Can I just step in for a quick second in regards to this? Number of years ago, when I had hair, I was an educational assistant. And one of the things I looked at it, when education is right, it's like a triangle. One part of the triangle is the school, another part of the triangle are the parents, and another triangle is the community. When those three corners are working together, education is magical.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Great point. Nice visual. Thank you, Ed. So as we wrap up today, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We hope that you've taken away some valuable practical principles that you can take and apply wherever you're working with your own children or whether you're supporting other families. Again, thank you to Government Care for the great support of helping us bring these conversations to you. At Dad Central, our goal is that we want to see an involved, responsible, and a caring dad for every child. And so we thank you for your support in being that dad or in helping support dads to be that for their families. We're wishing everyone a great weekend. Look forward to our next event in September. We're running these every month from now until December on a different topic. I'll give a plug. Technology is coming up in November. And then we're going to be talking about paternity leave next month in September. And so you can find out more about Dad Central at dadcentral.ca. We've got free resources, we've got training, we've got things that are going to help support both dads and their families. Okay, I'll be up in 1 second. No problem. So, and my wife's at work right now, so it's me and so as I wrap up and say thank you so much, and I find out more information at Dad Central.
Keep your focus, Drew.
At our next event. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks again, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.